So to reject the first assumption is to say that the conventions of the language do not directly associate expression with senses or contents. They don't do that. And the third assumption to reject it is to say that indexicals are not an exception. The distinction between conventional meaning and sense or content generalizes to all expression. Sense or content is not entirely fixed by the conventions of the language, but depends upon the context. In general, it's just not only true for indexicals, it's true in general. So, okay, let me give you examples of why that sort of view, which seems to be very extreme, treated basically all words as context sensitive, that seems to be fairly extreme, but it's not that extreme if you look actually at the words themselves, at the facts. I'll give you two examples of sort of classes of expressions that arguably can be described as the core of the language in a certain sense. The two types of expression are the core of the language for very different reasons. So first, I start with the Putnamian ideas about lexical semantics. So Putnam was concerned basically, as you know, with nouns. Nouns like tiger, pencil, bottle, water, all sorts of words, not only natural kind terms, but not only the nouns that are natural kind terms, but also artifact nouns. Anyway, the nouns he was concerned with, I believe, are the nouns, the nouns that are used to talk about things in our environment. This thing, that thing, this, all the stuff there is around us. We talk about those, the things in our environment by actually naming them. We have names for them. We have the name bottle, water, tiger, pencil. We use those names to talk about things we are very familiar with because they are present in our local environment. So those words are used to talk about things which are in the local environment, and we learn the words by getting acquainted with the things they're used to talk about. So we are actually acquainted with all those things. And that's arguably the core of the language, because why do we use language for? We use language to talk about the things in the environment, pretty clearly. Okay, now, Putnam has a story about those words, and actually what's interesting is that this story has never been refuted by anyone. And there are still people, even very influential people in semantics, who sort of hold that sort of view, so it's still quite okay. So, but according to Putnam, there is a lot of context sensitivity going on in those words. So Putnam criticizes the Freudian idea that the meaning of such a noun is a context-independent sense which fixes the noun's reference, that is its extension, which determines what belongs to the extension and what does not. And what Putnam says is that it's actually the other way around. We start with the reference, as it were. The noun is associated directly with contextually given exemplars, the things we are acquainted with. Exemplars known to fall into the extension of the noun. So we learn those words by being shown exemplars. Or perhaps on a more refined picture, the noun is associated with a stereotype, which is a body of encyclopedic knowledge, used to identify, which can be used to identify the local exemplars in one's environment. So I learned about tigers, even if I've not been shown a tiger, I learn a certain stereotype, and when I meet a tiger, I can recognize it because I've got this stereotype. So that's basically the idea. But the stereotype is not a Freudian sense. It doesn't determine the extension of the noun tiger. What determines the extension of the noun tiger, what determines what is a tiger and what is not the lexically given stereotype, but a certain relation R of similarity to the exemplars. So basically, we've been introduced to exemplars in the local environment, and the rule for determining whether something counts as a tiger or not is the rule, is it similar to that? And here there are two aspects of context dependence. The extension determining sense of the expression is context dependent on two counts. First, it depends upon the contextually given exemplars. So Putnam has this example of water in a certain environment. Water is H2O, but in another environment, something would be quite indistinguishable from water. It would play the same role, have the same superficial properties, but the composition would be different. And here, of course, this difference is a purely a difference in the environment. It's not a mental difference. There is no difference. In the mind of the users of the language, they use the word water in exactly the same way. But the stuff around there in their environment is different, and that has important semantic consequences for what will be water or not. Anything that is similar to the thing that is actually there in their environment will count as water. And if the thing in their environment is not H2O, that will be very relevant to what counts as water or not. Anyway, so the extension determining sense of an expression depends upon the contextually given exemplars, so that's what Putnam emphasizes, but it also depends upon the relation R of similarity. And that's also something that Putnam says. That relation R itself may vary according to the interest of the conversational participants. So what counts as water need not be whatever has the same physical properties or chemical properties or whatever than that. It may be whatever has the same superficial characteristic than that, or whatever has the same role in our life than that. It may be anything. The dimension of similarity, the relation R itself depends upon the interest of the conversational participants, and those interests are an aspect of the context. So that means that there is a lot of context sensitivity, actually 2 dimensions. Okay, so that was just an illustration of the fact that the core of the language, in the sense of those words we use to talk about familiar things we are acquainted with, those may well be context dependent. Now let me look at another aspect of the lexicon, which also deserves to be called the core of the lexicon, for quite different reasons. So here, have in mind the expressions that are the most frequent expressions. So if you look at the frequency table, you look at the expressions that are the most frequent in a language, and in general, that would be the expressions that are the expressions that are highly polysemous. Now, the problem is, what is the lexical meaning of a polysemous expression?